The card declined for the third time. Jason Brooks felt the heat crawl slowly up the back of his neck as the cashier gently slid the can of formula back across the counter. In his arms, 5-month-old Henry began to cry a small, hungry sound from a boy who had no idea his father had just run out of every last option. Behind them, a woman in a charcoal wool coat watched in silence. Claire Whitman had walked into that grocery store with nothing particular to buy. She would walk out with a decision. No board member, no personal attorney, and no ex-fiancé would ever understand. The office on the 42nd floor was still lit at 9:14 on a Wednesday night. Claire Whitman signed the last page of a contract she had already read 4 times, capped her pen, and looked out at a city that had never once felt like it belonged to her. Below her, headlights slid along the avenues in slow red rivers. Her assistant Eleanor Reed appeared in the doorway with a coat folded over one arm and the tired expression of a woman who had learned over 11 years when her boss needed to be sent home. "You haven't eaten," Eleanor said. She held out the coat. "There's nothing in your fridge either. I checked this morning." Claire took the coat without answering. She had built Whitman Holdings from a single leased floor into a company that owned parts of 3 American skylines, and she still could not remember the last time she had bought her own groceries. It was the kind of detail that sounded charming in interviews and felt hollow at night. "Go home, Eleanor." She managed a small, tired smile. "I'll stop somewhere on the way." Eleanor hesitated the way she always did, then nodded and left. Claire waited until the elevator chime faded, then stood at the window a long moment before she followed. She did not want to go back to the penthouse. The penthouse was cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. 2 years ago, she had shared it with a man named Marcus Hale, who had told her every morning that she was the only thing he had ever wanted, and who had transferred $4.2 million out of a joint account before disappearing on a Tuesday. Since then, the rooms had stayed clean and quiet and unused, and Claire had learned to prefer the office. She drove herself that night. Her driver had gone home at 7. The car was a black sedan she had bought because it did not look expensive, and she took the long route through neighborhoods where the streetlights blinked yellow. A small grocery store on the corner of 9th and Halsted was still open, its windows glowing against the dark. She parked without knowing why. She only knew she wanted to walk under bright fluorescent lights among strangers who did not know her name. Inside the store smelled of bread and floor cleaner. The aisles were nearly empty. A tired woman was mopping near the produce. Claire picked up a basket she did not need and drifted past shelves of cereal, past a stack of newspapers, past the dairy case, and she was halfway to the register when she first saw them. The man was tall and lean, in a jacket that had lost its shape somewhere around a second winter. He was cradling a baby in one arm, the way a person cradles something they're afraid of dropping. The baby was small, wrapped in a pale blue blanket, and quiet for the moment. In the man's other hand was a single can of infant formula and a folded piece of paper Claire would later realize was a coupon. His name was Jason Brooks, though she did not know that yet. She only saw a man who kept his eyes on the counter, as if the counter might tell him what to do next. 6 months earlier, Jason had been a warehouse foreman at a distribution center on the east side of the city. He had a small apartment, a used pickup, a wife named Rebecca, and a baby on the way. Then Rebecca had come home from the hospital with Henry sat on the edge of the bed for 2 days without speaking, and on the 3rd day she had left. She had left a note that said, "I can't do this," and a checkbook with a balance of $37. The warehouse had let him go 3 weeks later because he could not find childcare he could afford. The pickup had been repossessed in June. The apartment had gone at the end of July. What Jason had left on this Wednesday night in early September fit in a duffel bag zipped shut against the wall behind him. The cashier ran his card and shook her head. "Try it again," Jason said. His voice was quiet. He shifted Henry higher against his shoulder. "Sometimes it takes." She tried it again. The machine gave a small, patient beep. "Declined, sir. There's a different one." He fumbled in his wallet, produced a second card, laid it on the counter with the careful precision of a man handling something breakable. Claire, 3 feet behind him, watched his hand shake and pretend not to. The second card declined too. Henry began to fuss. It was not yet a cry, only the small sound of a baby who was starting to remember that he was hungry and had not been fed. Jason bounced him, gently, murmured something too low to hear, and pulled a third card from a compartment behind his driver's license. Claire could see his neck by then. She could see the red climbing up under his collar. "I don't think it's going to work, honey," the cashier said, and her voice was not unkind. "The machine's just going to say the same thing." Jason looked at the can of formula on the counter. He looked at Henry. He looked at the total on the small screen, which read $14.72. Claire understood in that moment that he was doing arithmetic in his head that had no answer. "I'll leave it," he said. The cashier's face fell. "Sir, it's okay. I'll leave it." He was already lifting the can, already sliding it back across the counter with 2 fingers, and Henry, as if he understood exactly what was happening, began to cry in earnest. The sound was thin and rising, and it filled the empty store. Jason's jaw tightened. He turned to leave without looking at anyone cradling his son against his chest, and Claire realized she had been holding her breath. She had watched men in boardrooms lose $10 million deals with less visible damage than what was happening on this man's face. Something in her chest moved that she had not felt in a long time. It was not pity. Pity was safe. Pity kept a distance. This was closer and more inconvenient, and she recognized it the way a person recognizes an old key in a drawer. It was the thing she had trained herself out of after Marcus, the small, stupid impulse to step toward a stranger who was drowning. Every rule she had built in the last 2 years told her not to move. She did not get involved. She did not talk to strangers in grocery stores. She wrote checks to foundations and let other people do the touching part. She had a personal policy half joked about with Eleanor that read, "Help no one whose name you do not already know." The man was almost at the door. Claire set down her basket. She did not decide to. Her hands decided for her. She crossed the linoleum in 5 strides, and by the time she reached the counter, she had already pulled her wallet from her coat. "I'll take the formula," she said to the cashier. She did not raise her voice. She kept her tone even almost bored the way she spoke in negotiations when she wanted the other side to think the number did not matter. And whatever else he was going to buy. The cashier looked at her, then at Jason, who had stopped 1 step from the door. He turned slowly. His face was very carefully arranged, which is how Claire knew what was underneath it. "Ma'am." His voice was low. "That's not necessary." "I know." She laid a black card on the counter. Henry was still crying against his shoulder. "It isn't necessary. I'd like to do it anyway." "I don't take charity." "It isn't charity." She met his eyes for the first time. They were gray and tired and older than the rest of him. "It's $14.72. It's a can of formula. A stranger is offering to pay for a can of formula for a baby who is hungry right now. That's all it is." "I don't know you." He said it almost apologetically. "I don't know why you'd do that." Claire looked down at Henry at the tiny fist pressed against the collar of Jason's jacket. She looked back at Jason. She thought about the elevator up to her empty penthouse, about the 2 years of ordering food she rarely ate, about the way she had begun lately to feel less like a person and more like a signature on other people's paperwork. "I don't know either," she said. It was the truest thing she had said out loud in months. Jason's jaw worked. He looked at the can of formula. He looked at his son. Henry's cry was steadier now, insistent, the sound of a baby who did not care about pride. "Please take it back off the shelf," Claire said to the cashier quietly. "Ring it up." The cashier moved. Jason did not move. He stood by the door with Henry in his arms and watched a woman he had never seen before slide a black credit card into a machine and enter a PIN without looking at the keypad. The transaction took 4 seconds. The cashier bagged the can and a small bottle of water and a granola bar Claire slipped from the display and set on the counter without comment. She handed the bag toward Jason. He did not take it. "I can't pay you back. I'm not asking you to." "Then I can't take it." Claire did not raise her voice. She held the bag out and let it hang there in the air between them. Henry cried. The cashier looked away the way strangers do when they are trying to give 2 other strangers privacy in a place that has none. "He's hungry," Claire said. She said it gently. She said it the way you would explain a very simple thing to someone who has forgotten how to hear simple things. "Whatever you and I are doing right now, he doesn't know about it. He is 5 months old, and he is hungry, and I have a can of formula in a bag. Please take the bag." Jason's eyes closed for 1 long second. When he opened them, something in his face had come apart in a way he could not fix. He reached out with his free hand. He took the bag. His fingers brushed hers, and he flinched as if he had been burned. "Thank you," he said. His voice was hoarse. He turned and pushed through the door before she could answer. The bell above it rang once, and then the store was quiet again, except for the hum of the coolers and the sound of Henry's crying moving out into the parking lot. Claire stood at the counter with her card still in her hand. The cashier looked at her. Claire looked at the door. Outside under the yellow security light, Jason had stopped by a bench. He was tearing at the plastic seal of the formula can with his teeth, because he could not do it, and hold Henry at the same time. Claire put the card back in her wallet, picked up her coat and walked out after him. The parking lot smelled like rain that had not fallen yet. Jason was seated on the metal bench with Henry propped in the crook of his elbow, working the plastic seal off the can with his teeth. He heard her heels on the pavement before he saw her, and his shoulders tightened the way a man's shoulders do when he has been caught at something. Claire stopped a few feet away. She did not sit. She set the plastic bag on the bench between them, took out the water bottle, twisted it open, and held it out toward him without a word. "You'll need this to mix it," she said, "unless you had somewhere to warm it." He took the bottle because his hands were already occupied with a hungry child, and pride was a luxury he could not afford in the next 30 seconds. He fumbled the powder scoop, spilled a little on his knee, brushed it away. Henry's crying dropped in pitch the moment the nipple touched his mouth. The sound in the parking lot became all at once quiet. Jason watched his son drink for a moment before he could look up. "You don't have to stand there," he said. His voice was not angry. It was only very tired. "I'm not going to run off with your bag." "I know." "Then what are you doing?" Claire looked at him. She had asked herself the same question 3 times since setting down her basket in the store, and she still did not have a clean answer. What she had instead was the memory of her own kitchen at 7 o'clock that morning empty, except for a bottle of sparkling water and a jar of olives, and the sound of Eleanor's voice saying you haven't eaten. "I'm trying," she said slowly, "to figure out if you have somewhere to go." He did not answer right away. He shifted Henry higher, checked the angle of the bottle, wiped a bead of formula from the baby's chin with his thumb. When he finally spoke, he did not look at her. "I have a place." "Is it far?" "Not far." She had negotiated with men whose life's work was lying to her. She knew what a real answer sounded like, and this was not one. "I could drive you." "That's not necessary. It's cold, and it's about to rain, and your son is 5 months old." She said it the way she might have read a line off a spreadsheet. "You've already accepted a can of formula. A ride is not a larger thing than that." Jason looked at Henry. Henry, half asleep now, was drinking with the solemn concentration of a small animal that had learned to distrust its own luck. Jason's throat worked. "You're not a taxi service?" "No." "So why?" Claire sat down at the other end of the bench. She did not look at him when she answered. She looked out at the parking lot at her black sedan, under the yellow security light at the empty street beyond. "Because 2 years ago," she said, I stopped being the kind of person who would do this, and I don't like her very much. And tonight, I would like for about 40 minutes to be someone else. That was closer to the truth than she had intended to come with a stranger. Jason turned his head and looked at her properly for the first time, and something in his face softened at the edges. It was not sympathy. It was recognition. The look of one tired person acknowledging another. 40 minutes, he said. 40 minutes. He nodded once. He capped the bottle, tucked Henry against his shoulder, and stood. She drove them east through streets she did not know well. The rain started as they crossed the bridge, small drops at first, then a steady tapping on the roof of the sedan. Henry slept in Jason's arms. Jason gave directions in short, quiet sentences. Turn here. 2 blocks. Right at the light. Claire did not ask questions. She had learned in 11 years of running a company that people told you the truth faster when you did not try to pull it out of them. They passed a boarded-up laundromat and a stretch of chain-link fence. Then Jason said, "Anywhere along here is fine." Claire slowed but did not stop. There were no houses. There was a lot on the left where someone had begun building something 2 years ago, a 3-story frame with plywood over the lower windows and a chain looped loosely around the front gate. There was a strip of grass on the right and a bus stop with no bench. That was all. "Where?" she said. "Anywhere is fine. Where do you live, Jason?" He did not answer. He looked out the window at the construction site with an expression Claire recognized from the boardroom, the expression of a man who has run out of moves and is trying to decide whether to knock over the board or keep pretending. She pulled the sedan over to the curb across from the fence. She put it in park. She turned in her seat. "That building," she said. "It's dry inside. There are no walls on the 2nd floor. I can see it from here. The corner on the ground level has walls. I keep him in a car seat. It's warmer than you think." Claire did not answer him. She was looking at the chain around the gate, at the way it had been cut, and then rehooked so that it looked from the street like it was still holding. She was looking at the darkness inside the doorway. She was thinking about the rain, which was harder now, and about a 5-month-old baby who had been crying an hour ago because he was hungry. "How long?" she said. 6 weeks. How long tonight? I don't understand the question. How long until you have somewhere else? Jason looked down at Henry. He did not answer. That was the answer. Claire put the car back into drive. Jason's head snapped up. "What are you doing?" "You are not sleeping there tonight. You said 40 minutes. I'm past 40 minutes. Ma'am, my name is Claire." "Claire." His voice was tight. "I appreciate what you did in the store. I do. But I don't know you, and my son is not a reason for me to owe a stranger something I can't pay back." She kept driving. The wipers moved once, twice. "You wouldn't owe me anything." "That's not how the world works. It's how tonight works." He did not answer. He watched the construction site slide backward in the passenger window, and his jaw set in a way that told her he was preparing to open the door at the next red light. She saw him check the child lock out of the corner of his eye. It was engaged. He looked at her. "Jason." She kept her voice level. "It is 41 degrees outside. It is raining. If something happens to him tonight in that building, you will remember it for the rest of your life. You know that. I know that. Let me give you 1 night indoors. 1 night. Tomorrow morning you can walk out my front door and never see me again." His breath went out of him slowly. He looked down at Henry at the small face pressed to his collarbone. Henry made a small sound in his sleep, the kind of sound that means nothing and everything at once. 1 night, Jason said. 1 night. He did not speak the rest of the way. Her house sat behind a low iron gate at the end of a driveway lined with lindens. It was not a mansion in the way the word is used in headlines. It was long and gray-stoned and quiet, the kind of house that looked like it had always been standing there. Claire did not use it. She had bought it 3 years ago because Marcus had wanted a place outside the city. After he left, she had kept it empty. Eleanor had a housekeeper come through every 2 weeks to run the water and turn on the lights. Jason stopped in the front hall with Henry against his shoulder and did not step off the entry mat. "I can sleep on a couch," he said. "There's a guest suite on the first floor. It has a crib in it because my sister used to come. It hasn't been used in a while." "A couch is fine. The suite has a lock on the inside." She met his eyes. "You can turn it. I won't come in." He held her gaze for a moment. Then he nodded and let her show him the room. She did not sleep well. She had not slept well in 2 years, but that night she slept less than most. She lay in her own bed on the second floor and listened to the rain and thought about the sound of a card being declined and about the way Jason's fingers had brushed hers when he took the bag and about the small, warm weight of a baby she had not touched. In the morning, her phone woke her at 6:40. It was Daniel Voss. Daniel had been her partner on the Riverbend Tower deal for 18 months. He was calling to tell her in a voice full of practiced regret that his investors were pulling out of the joint venture that afternoon, and that a competing group had, by pure coincidence, made him an offer he could not refuse on the same parcel. He was very sorry. He hoped she understood. He had tried to reach her yesterday. She listened to the whole call without speaking. When he was finished, she said, "How long have you known?" There was a small silence on the other end. "Since Monday." She hung up. She sat on the edge of her bed for a long time. Riverbend had been 18 months of her life. She had put her name on it because she had believed Daniel, and because her lawyers had told her the paperwork was solid, and because, after Marcus, she had promised herself she would never again let personal feeling cloud a business decision. Riverbend had been the proof to herself that she had learned. It was going to break in the papers by Friday. Her board would ask questions she could not answer. The share price would drop. It was not the money. It was again that a man she had trusted had walked around behind her while she was working. She did not cry. She had not cried in front of anyone since she was 19. And she did not intend to start alone in a bedroom on a Thursday morning. She showered. She dressed. She went downstairs. The rain was still falling. Through the kitchen window, she could see the terrace beyond gray and wet. She stood at the counter with a cup of coffee she was not drinking and did not hear Jason come in behind her. "He's still asleep," he said quietly from the doorway. "I wanted to say thank you. We'll go as soon as he wakes up." Claire did not turn around. She was looking out at the rain. She heard him take a step back, misreading her stillness for dismissal, and she heard herself say, before she had decided to, "Daniel Voss just took 18 months of my work and sold it to somebody else this morning." She did not know why she was telling him. He was a stranger. He had been in her house for less than 12 hours. "I'm sorry," Jason said. "I trusted him." "I know what that costs." She turned around then. He was standing in the doorway in the same jacket from the night before, with dark circles under his eyes, and a coffee mug she must have set out for him held in both hands. He was looking at her the way she had looked at him in the store the night before, which was to say without pity, and without the small, cruel distance most people put between themselves and someone else's bad news. For one long moment in a kitchen that had never held anything real, Claire Whitman looked at a man she barely knew and understood with the clean certainty of a hammer striking metal that she was very close to breaking. Jason did not step forward. He did not tell her that she should sit down or that everything would be all right, or any of the things people say when they want someone else's pain to end quickly, so that their own discomfort can end with it. He stood in the doorway with both hands around the coffee mug and waited. "I built that project from a napkin," Claire said. She was not looking at him. She was looking at the rain on the terrace stones. "There was a piece of land on the river that nobody wanted, and I saw what it could be, and I spent 18 months of my life on it. Daniel came in 6 months ago because I needed a construction partner. He needed my capital and my zoning contacts. That was the deal. And now he has both without you." He was polite about it. She gave a small, dry laugh that had nothing to do with amusement. He hoped I would understand. Do you? I understand it, she said. That's not the same thing. Jason set the coffee mug down on the island. He did not come closer. He looked at her across the length of the marble the way a person looks at someone standing on the other side of a river when the bridge is out. When my wife left, he said, I stood in the kitchen for 2 hours. I didn't cry. I made a list. I made a list of everything I could sell and everything I owed, and how many weeks I had before the numbers stopped working. And the whole time I was making the list, I was thinking she'll come back. Because that was easier than making the list. Claire looked at him. She didn't come back, Jason said. The list didn't work either. So I know what you're thinking right now. You're thinking there's a version of the last 18 months where you saw this coming, and you should have seen it coming. And if you had been smarter or harder or less trusting, it wouldn't have happened. You're thinking it's your fault for having believed him. Isn't it? No. He said it flatly. It's his fault for lying. That's the whole answer. It's a small answer and it doesn't help right now, but it's the whole answer. Claire did not respond. Her hands were flat on the counter and she was staring at them as if they belonged to someone else. I should go, Jason said quietly. You don't need a stranger in your kitchen this morning. Stay. She said it before she knew she was going to. Jason did not move. He was watching her the way she had watched him under the yellow security light the night before. Careful waiting. Henry will be up in 20 minutes, she said. There's oatmeal in the pantry. There's a coffee that isn't this one. Stay for breakfast, and then we'll figure out what you do next. Claire, I don't want to be alone in this house right now. Her voice was even, but it was not steady. That's the honest thing. I'd rather not be alone. If you can give me 40 minutes back, I would take them. Jason nodded once. He did not say anything else. He walked past her to the pantry and began looking for the oatmeal. She did not go to the office that day. She called Eleanor at 7:30 and said only that she needed the morning. Eleanor, who had worked for her for 11 years, did not ask questions. She said, I'll move the 10 o'clock. Take the day. And hung up. Henry woke at 7:50. Jason went to get him, and when he came back down the stairs with the baby against his shoulder, Claire was still at the kitchen island. Henry looked at her over his father's collar with the wide, unfocused stare of a small person who had not yet decided about the world. He was wearing a onesie that had been washed too many times. He's usually pretty easy in the morning, Jason said. He was setting up the formula. Sometimes he's grabby. Just watch your earrings. I'm not wearing any. You will be eventually. She had not smiled in 24 hours. She smiled then, a small one, an involuntary thing. Jason handed her the warmed bottle before she understood he was going to. I've never fed a baby, Claire said. You hold him like this. He shifted Henry into her arms with a practiced motion, adjusting her elbow with 2 fingers tipping the bottle. Henry latched on without protest. His small hand came up and closed around Claire's index finger, the way small hands do without thought, because there was a finger there. Claire looked down at him. She did not say anything for a long time. The rain kept falling on the terrace. Somewhere in the house, a clock she had never noticed before ticked quietly. He's warm, she said at last. Yeah, I mean actually warm. I forgot people were actually warm. Jason did not answer that. He leaned against the counter and drank his coffee and watched a woman he had known for less than 15 hours feed his son for the first time, and something in his own face when Claire looked up was very carefully held together. 3 days became a week. A week became 2. Jason did not ask to stay, and Claire did not ask him to leave. On the 4th morning, Eleanor came to the house with a folder of documents and stopped in the front hall with her mouth slightly open. Claire introduced them briefly. Eleanor, who had learned long ago not to react to anything her boss did in front of witnesses, shook Jason's hand and said it was nice to meet him, and went into the study to wait. When Claire followed her in and closed the door, Eleanor set down the folder and said only, I like his face. That is not helpful. You didn't hire me to be helpful. You hired me to notice things." Claire did not answer. Eleanor opened the folder. The Riverbend story broke on Friday, as Claire had known it would. It was not as bad as she had feared. Her lawyers had done their work, and the language of Daniel's exit made him look worse than it made her look. The share price wobbled and steadied. The board asked their questions. She answered them. She sat in a conference room on the 42nd floor on Monday morning and gave a 15-minute presentation on the pivot she had already in her head been building since Thursday. When she came home that night, Jason was at the kitchen island with Henry and a bouncer at his feet, chopping onions badly. "You said you could cook," Claire said, setting down her bag. "I said I could feed you. That's a different claim." She laughed. It surprised her. It had been a long time since anything had made her laugh in her own house. There were small things. Jason fixed the hinge on the pantry door that had been squeaking since she bought the house. He learned where things were kept. He did not touch the study or the room upstairs that had been Marcus's office or anything he was not asked to touch. Once, when Claire came in from a run, she found him teaching Henry to reach for a set of car keys held just out of range, and Henry laughed. For the first time she had ever heard a wet, delighted sound. And Jason looked up at her in the doorway and grinned like a man who could not help it. On the 10th night, Henry ran a fever. Claire did not know how she knew. She had gone up for a glass of water at 2 in the morning and heard something small and fretful through the guest suite door, and she had knocked without thinking. Jason opened it in a t-shirt and sweatpants with Henry against his chest. The baby's cheeks were red. His breath was fast. "He's warm," Jason said. His voice was tight. "He hasn't done this before." "How warm?" "I don't have a thermometer." Claire went and got the one from her own bathroom. It read 101.4. Jason's face did a thing she had not seen on it before. He was not a man who panicked easily. He was panicking quietly. "There's a pediatric urgent care 10 minutes from here," Claire said. "Get his blanket." She drove. Jason sat in the back with Henry in her sister's old car seat, which Claire had without saying anything to anyone installed in the sedan 4 days earlier. In the waiting room, she sat next to him with her coat over her knees and did not touch him and did not speak. When the nurse called them back, Jason stood up, and then he looked at her and he said very quietly, "Would you come?" She came. It was an ear infection. The doctor was calm about it. She prescribed antibiotics. She said the fever would break by morning. Jason held Henry through the exam, and Claire stood beside them with her hand on the edge of the exam table, and when the doctor was writing the prescription, Henry reached one small hand up and grabbed a strand of Claire's hair and held on. She did not move. She stood there and let him hold on, and Jason was watching her, and she was watching Henry, and none of them said anything at all. They got back to the house at 4 in the morning. Jason put Henry down in the crib in the guest suite. Claire stood in the doorway and watched him do it. When he turned around, she was still there. "Thank you," Jason said. "You keep saying that." "I keep meaning it." She looked at him for a long moment. The hallway light was on behind her. His face was half in shadow. "Jason," she said, "in the store that night, when I asked you why you thought I'd pay for the formula, do you remember what you said?" "I said I didn't know. And I said I didn't know either." "I remember. That wasn't true." She kept her voice quiet because Henry was sleeping. "I knew. I knew the second I saw you put the can back on the counter. I knew because 2 years ago I stopped believing that anyone would ever look at me and see a person instead of a number. And I saw you standing there trying to feed your son. And I understood that I had become the exact thing I used to be afraid of. Somebody who has enough watching somebody who doesn't, and doing nothing. I couldn't be that person for one more minute. That's why I did it. Not for you. For me." Jason did not move. "I don't know what this is," Claire said. "You and me. This last week. I don't know if it's real or if I'm just tired, or if I'm using you to feel something after a very bad Monday. But I need to say the true thing, because I have spent 2 years saying almost nothing true out loud, and I am tired of it." "It's real for me," Jason said. She looked at him. "I don't have anything to offer you." His voice was low. "I want to be clear about that. I don't have a job yet. I don't have a place. I have a son who wakes up twice a night. If I say anything to you right now, you are going to think I'm saying it because you paid for a can of formula, and I don't want you to think that. So I've been not saying it, but it's real for me. It's been real for me since you sat down on that bench in the parking lot." "I know." "How do you know?" "Because I have spent a lot of years listening to men lie to me," Claire said, "and you are very bad at it." The corner of his mouth moved. He stepped into the hallway. He did not touch her. He stood a foot away from her and looked down at her, and for the second time in 10 days, Claire Whitman understood with the clean certainty of a hammer striking metal that she was not going to be able to protect herself from what was about to happen. She did not want to. "I am not going to be an easy person," she said quietly. "I don't know how to do this. Neither do I. I have a lot of money. I know. That's going to be complicated. I know. I need you to know that I did not do this because I was lonely." Jason looked at her. "I did it," Claire said, "because I saw you and I remembered who I used to be, and I want to be her again. Slowly, if you'll let me try." He reached up. His hand touched the side of her face, and it was warm, the way Henry had been warm, and Claire closed her eyes for 1 second, and then opened them again, because she wanted to see him when she said it. "Stay," she said. "Not for the night. Stay." "Okay," Jason said. It was as small a word as any word could be. It was enough. A year later, on a Wednesday night in early September, a black sedan pulled into the parking lot of a small grocery store on the corner of 9th and Halsted. The rain had not started yet, but the air smelled like it might. Claire got out of the driver's side. Jason got out of the passenger side. He opened the back door and unbuckled Henry from the car seat, and Henry, who was 17 months old and had opinions about most things, insisted on walking in himself, holding one of Claire's fingers on the left and one of Jason's on the right. The bell above the door rang the way it had rung a year ago. The store looked the same. Different cashier, same coolers, same fluorescent lights, same tired woman mopping near the produce. They walked to the baby aisle. Claire took a can of formula off the shelf, not because Henry still drank it, he did not, but because a year ago tonight she had bought one for a stranger, and she had promised herself silently that on this date, every year for the rest of her life, she would come back and buy another one and leave it at the customer service counter with 2 words written on the receipt for whoever needs it. Jason held Henry while she paid. The cashier ran the card. It went through on the first try. "Do you want a bag?" the cashier asked. "No," Claire said. "It's staying here." She walked to the customer service window at the front of the store. There was a young woman behind the counter. Claire set the can down and slid it across the surface. "This is prepaid," she said. "If someone comes through tonight and their card doesn't work, this is for them. You don't have to explain where it came from." The young woman looked at her. Then she looked at Jason, standing by the door with a small boy in his arms. She looked back at Claire. "That's really nice of you," she said. "It isn't," Claire said. "It's the least a person can do." She walked back to Jason. He shifted Henry to his other hip and held out his free hand. She took it. They walked out together under the same yellow security light, past the same metal bench. Henry, who had learned the word home 3 weeks earlier, and used it whenever he approved of something pointed at the sedan, and said it now. And Claire, who 2 years ago had not believed she would ever again be somebody's home, laughed and buckled him into his car seat and closed the door. The rain started as they pulled out of the lot. She reached across the console. Jason took her hand without looking. They drove east together through streets that had once been unfamiliar toward a long, gray-stoned house with a light on in the kitchen window waiting for them.